Yemen has just launched strikes on Israel, and the entire Middle East is heating up like never before. Could this be the start of something far bigger? Today, we break down exactly what happened, who is involved, and what this means for the future of the region. Stay tuned. This is a story you don't want to miss. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a major breaking story that has shocked the world. Yemen has launched strikes on Israel, bringing the already tense Middle East situation to the brink of a wider conflict. This development isn't just another headline, it's part of a bigger puzzle involving years of regional tension, shifting alliances, and global powers trying to maintain control. In this video, we will unpack everything: what triggered these attacks, who is supporting whom behind the scenes, and what might happen next. The conflict between Yemen's Houthi movement and Israel is not just a two-player game. It has direct ties to Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United States, and even Russia and China in indirect ways. For years, Yemen has been locked in a devastating civil war, but now their military capabilities are reaching across borders. These strikes on Israel represent a dramatic escalation that could drag the entire region into a new phase of violence. So buckle up as we break this down into 10 key sections that will help you understand this crisis like never before. Let's start with the background on Yemen's conflict. The story of Yemen's current conflict goes back to 2014, when the Houthi movement, a group with deep religious and political roots, took control of Yemen's capital, Sana'a. This led to the collapse of the internationally recognized government and triggered a war involving multiple players. Saudi Arabia led a coalition to restore the government, launching airstrikes across Yemen. Iran was accused of backing the Houthis, providing weapons and strategic support. Over time, Yemen became a battlefield for a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, with civilians paying the highest price. Millions faced famine, disease outbreaks, and displacement. The war also gave Houthis the chance to expand their military capabilities, developing drones and missiles that could strike beyond Yemen's borders. Over the last few years, they have targeted Saudi oil facilities, airports, and even UAE sites. The strikes on Israel are the latest sign that Yemen's war is no longer contained. The Houthis see themselves as part of the wider axis of resistance against Israel and its allies. This background is key to understanding why Yemen would take such a bold step against Israel at this time. The strikes that shocked the world reportedly involved long-range drones and ballistic missiles launched from Houthi-controlled parts of Yemen. Several projectiles were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome and Arrow defense systems, but at least a few caused damage and injuries. This is a huge development because Yemen is located more than 1,000 miles away from Israel. Successfully reaching Israel shows a significant leap in Houthi capabilities. These attacks came shortly after escalating tensions in Gaza and southern Lebanon, suggesting a coordinated effort by groups opposed to Israel. The Houthis claimed responsibility almost immediately, calling the strikes a response to Israel's actions in Gaza and their support for what the Houthis call aggression against the Palestinian people. Israeli officials have vowed to respond strongly and hold those responsible accountable. What makes this situation even more dangerous is that Israel now has to consider striking targets inside Yemen, which could widen the conflict dramatically. The world is watching closely as Israeli warplanes and naval assets are reportedly preparing for possible retaliation. This direct attack has forced Israel's security establishment to think beyond its northern and Gaza fronts. Israel is known for responding swiftly and decisively to any threat. Within hours of the Yemen strikes, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened an emergency security cabinet meeting to discuss possible responses. The Israeli Defense Forces have already stepped up their surveillance over the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, Warplanes have been placed on high alert, and missile defense systems are being redeployed to cover potential southern threats. There are reports that Israel may conduct targeted airstrikes on Houthi missile depots or command centers. Such a move would mark the first time Israel has openly struck Yemen, which could trigger an entirely new front in the conflict. Israeli officials have stated that they hold not only the Houthis, but also their backers, namely Iran, responsible for this aggression. Israel's allies, including the United States and United Kingdom, have expressed support for Israel's right to defend itself. The big question is whether Israel will limit its response to a warning strike or go for a more sustained campaign. The decision could determine whether this crisis escalates into a full regional war or remains a one-off confrontation. The strikes have sparked a flurry of reactions across the Middle East. Iran has praised Yemen's actions, calling them a legitimate response to Israeli aggression in Gaza. Saudi Arabia, which has been in peace talks with the Houthis, is now in a delicate position. On one hand, it doesn't want to see the region spiral into chaos again. On the other hand, it may quietly welcome pressure on Israel. The United Arab Emirates has condemned the strikes, fearing instability could threaten its own security. Lebanon's Hezbollah has signaled that it stands in solidarity with Yemen's resistance, raising fears of a coordinated front against Israel. The United States has warned Iran and its allies not to escalate the situation, sending naval assets closer to the region as a show of force. Egypt and Jordan, two countries that have peace treaties with Israel, are calling for calm and dialogue. This mix of support, condemnation, and caution shows just how divided the Middle East is right now. Each country is calculating its moves carefully to avoid being pulled into a war that could destabilize the entire region. What happens in the Middle East rarely stays in the Middle East. The United States, as Israel's closest ally, is closely monitoring the situation. American warships in the Red Sea have reportedly intercepted some missiles, preventing them from reaching Israeli territory. This direct involvement raises the stakes. Russia, meanwhile, has called for restraint but sees the situation as an opportunity to expand its influence by acting as a mediator. China, which recently brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, is urging dialogue and offering to facilitate talks. The European Union has condemned the strikes, but also warned Israel to avoid disproportionate retaliation. These global powers are not just spectators, they have military bases, economic interests, and political alliances in the region. If the conflict spirals, it could affect global oil prices, shipping routes in the Red Sea, and even international security. This is why world leaders are scrambling to contain the crisis before it gets out of control. The involvement of these powers shows that this is no longer a local conflict, but a matter of global significance. While governments plan their next moves, ordinary people are paying the price. Yemen is already one of the world's worst humanitarian disasters, with millions dependent on aid for survival. An expanded conflict that draws Israeli airstrikes into Yemen would be catastrophic for civilians. Hospitals are already overwhelmed. Infrastructure is crumbling and food supplies are fragile. In Israel, residents in the southern and central regions are on edge, running to bomb shelters whenever air raid sirens sound. Families are living under constant fear of more missile strikes. Human rights groups are warning that if this situation escalates, we could see a massive displacement crisis, not just in Yemen, but across the region. The humanitarian angle is crucial because it reminds us that beyond the politics, real lives are at stake. International organizations like the UN are calling for restraint and urging all parties to prioritize the protection of civilians. The hope is that diplomacy will step in before the humanitarian cost becomes unbearable. But with emotions running high on all sides, the risk of miscalculation remains dangerously high. Any conflict in the Middle East has ripple effects on the global economy, and this situation is no different. Yemen is strategically located near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a critical choke point for global shipping. If the conflict escalates and Houthi forces target shipping lanes, it could disrupt oil and trade routes that supply Europe, Asia, and the US. Oil prices have already spiked slightly following the news of the strikes, as traders fear a broader regional war could threaten production in Saudi Arabia or the Gulf. Insurance premiums for ships traveling through the Red Sea are rising, which could lead to higher shipping costs globally. Israel's economy is also taking a hit as investors grow nervous about security risks. Tourism, which is a significant part of Israel's economy, is likely to see a decline if the situation continues. These economic consequences add pressure on world leaders to de-escalate quickly. Markets hate uncertainty, and the longer this crisis lasts, the more global economies could feel the impact from higher fuel prices to slower trade and rising inflation. The big question everyone is asking: what happens next? There are several possible scenarios. In the best case, Israel responds with a limited, targeted strike that sends a message but avoids a full-scale war. Diplomatic efforts could then step in to negotiate de-escalation. Another scenario is a wider conflict where Israel launches multiple strikes on Yemen, prompting more attacks, not just from the Houthis, but from Hezbollah in Lebanon or even militias in Iraq. This would create a multi-front war, something Israel wants to avoid but might be forced to confront. A worst-case scenario would involve direct confrontation between Israel and Iran, dragging in the US and potentially leading to a regional war. There's also the chance that internal politics in Israel and Yemen could push leaders toward more aggressive action to satisfy domestic audiences. The next few days are critical in determining which path we take. History has shown that once the cycle of retaliation begins, it is very hard to stop. This is why many analysts are urging immediate diplomacy to prevent an uncontrollable escalation. This situation is a turning point for the Middle East. Yemen's strikes on Israel are not just a symbolic act, they represent a dangerous escalation that could ignite a much larger conflict. We've explored the background, the strikes themselves, Israel's potential response, regional and global reactions, humanitarian concerns, economic effects, and possible scenarios for the future. Now, all eyes are on how Israel and its allies choose to respond. Will this crisis be contained, or are we about to witness a new chapter in Middle Eastern conflict? Time will tell, but one thing is clear: the stakes have never been higher. If you found this breakdown helpful and want to stay updated on what happens next, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Also, share this video with friends who want to understand what's really happening in the Middle East right now. Your support helps us bring you fast, accurate, and unbiased news analysis. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next video.